Common lifting mistakes. We're going to tackle the 4 main lifts: deadlift, squat, press, and bench press. We're going to show you what you're doing wrong and how to fix it. All right, let's start off with the deadlift. It's one lift that everyone loves to do. When the deadlift, a lot of us don't realize it, a deadlift is a core movement. I know much people don't want to believe that, but the core will tell you everything that you need to know on the deadlift. Yes, we are using the legs, but the core is what's going to give when we're trying to lift a heavy weight. And we see kind of 2 things happen when we are doing that deadlift and that core breaks down. But let's first start off with a good quality deadlift, Nadine. Good. What makes this deadlift good in quality is that when she's up, she has the butt, the shoulders, the head. When she's down, butt, the shoulders, the head are all touching. So this makes sure that we are hinging right on the hip. So when she goes down, the hinge happens here. Okay? That's a really good way to tell. Relax. Really good way to tell that that is a quality deadlift, making sure that we are keeping that spine aligned. Now, your legs can be longer, your torso can be shorter, your legs could be shorter, your torso could be longer. You might have more of a hinge, you might have more of a squat. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. As long as that spine is staying relatively neutral, it's going to have the curvature of it during that movement. As well as you can have some slight rounding of the back when you're doing the deadlift. There is nothing wrong with that. Everyone's like, if you're rounding your back, you're doing it wrong. No. As long as we're keeping the engagement of the core tight by pushing the belly out to kicking on the obliques, and we feel the abs working while we go through that movement, we can have a slight rounding on that. For instance, try to pick up a stone with a neutral back, like legitimately. Go pick up a stone with your back. That's perfect. You're not going to do it. You have to round the back to pick things up. Remember, there's no such thing as a bad movement, just more efficient movements. So we have that good deadlift that we just did. Let's change that to one or the other. Let's go into where we are trying to push the hips back. This is a good cue that we hear a lot of times. And when we push the hips back, we're creating that stripper butt and pushing our butt out. And then what's happening is in that lower back, we're creating the smashing together of the vertebrae of the spine. We're going to the end range where we can't extend that spine anymore. And that is not good, which means we don't even need to use the front of the core. We're just using the spine to hold us in the upper position. So a lot of times it's in the lower part of that lift that we're going to pick the head up, and then we're creating a lot of this arch right here, and then we're going to stand that up, and then we come back down. Once again, we're having this big arch that's happening right here. Now, for most of us, this is where we're going to feel it in our back, but we're too worried about the weight on the bar, so we're going to just keep on lifting, and who cares about that back, right? No, we don't want that. So with that position, we're just looking at creating more of the core engagement. So one cue that I always tell people is if they had a string from the belly button to the sternum, we want to kind of keep that the same. So as we are hinging, we're not trying to extend that string. We're going to keep that string, that distance exactly the same. Now we have another method too of what we call the dog poop butt. This is where we get the full rounding of the back. A lot of times this is done with a barbell, right here, because we're either going around the knees too much, but we're going to see that rounding in the opposite direction. And we don't want that either, because now we're just pulling straight from the spine, especially if it gets heavy. It's lightweight, once again, it's not a big issue. You're trying to pick a rock up off the ground, it's not a big issue because you're going to create tension in all different parts. But if we're sticking to a barbell and we're sitting in that position, there is a really quick fix for that. And that quick fix is doing a kettlebell deadlift. So if you notice when she was on there, she was going around the knees. The knees are really coming forward. So when the knees are coming forward, we're sliding that barbell down the thighs as it gets forward past these knees. We're trying to push the hips back to make up for that. But in reality, we should just be working on more of that hinge. Well, if we don't have the knees to fight or push that bar around or slide that down, then we can get into a better position. So we just set up with that kettlebell directly between the legs, and then we can just hinge over, and now we're not going to have a big issue with either direction, whether we are going into the stripper butt or we're going into the dog poop butt. Either one, the kettlebell will help fix this position, let it feel a little bit more natural. You don't have to worry about the bar going around the hands. So try those out on your deadlift. All right, the next movement we're going to go into is the press. So the press is coming from the shoulder to overhead. Once again, we always see the breakdown of the core is what's happening. Let me get this out of the way. So Nadine's going to bring that bar up onto the shoulders, and kind of like what I talked about on the deadlift, having the same distance. I like to do what she just did, create a little bit of a crunch into that position, a little bit of a hollow body position, just so we can feel the abs engaged. And from here, we're just going to press it straight up. Just moving the head out of the way, coming all the way up, and coming back down to the ground. Now, we might have a little bit of extension of the spine. That's okay. Once again, we can have a little bit of extension of the spine. Press it up. We can have a little bit of extension in the spine here as long as she's feeling that these obliques and these abs are turned on, and that's what we're looking for, and then we can come back down. Now, what we have a tendency to see, especially when that weight gets up, that we are going to turn this press into a bench press almost, or a leaning back bench press, a leaning back press. You know, if you're a professional strongman, then yeah, go right ahead. Highly don't suggest this for anybody to do. But with that, what happens is that weight gets heavy, so we're going to try and use the pecs to help lift that up, and then we're leaning back and then bringing it back down. We don't want this. Well, not unless you're actually purposely training this movement. You should not be doing this when we're creating that press up there. We do not have the press going in the other direction. It just doesn't really happen. So we don't have to worry about that. So the big cue for that is just making sure that we're keeping the contraction here. We might feel it extend a little bit, but I can feel this extend while my core is engaged, and that's what we're looking at. If this becomes tough or we have a hard time getting those arms, that the biceps are pretty much in line with the ears when we're pressed up overhead, a good alternative to this is dumbbells. And another alternative that we have for this is working more of a landmine press or a Viking press. So if we go to press up overhead and we're keeping the core down, but the arms only go here, if we try to raise them up, we get the extension. What we can do is work on more of that vertical press. So we're pressing up into here. And in general, we could even do this into a half kneeling position that we're pressing up, or tall kneeling position. I'm going to be pressing up. So we're still getting a little bit more of a vertical press into that position, but we're not sacrificing our spine to get that range of motion into what we need to do. All right, we're going to move on to back squat next. With the back squat, you can take this from a rack or from the ground. We like doing it at Primal Path from the ground, because if you can pick the weight up, bring it onto your shoulders, it's great. There is definitely a purpose that we do want to be squatting out of a rack. Yes, very important. We're trying to look for absolute strength, increase that. We have a purpose, great. If we're just a person who's looking to get fit for every day, being able to pick a bar up on the ground, bring it onto your shoulders and back squat it, having that level of fitness is perfect for the everyday human being. So we're just going to do this from the ground. So we're just going to pick that bar up, press it up overhead. So we're deadlifting and pressing. Now we're going to the back squat. Kind of see the order? Cool. So same thing with this. Everything that we talked about, it doesn't matter whether it's the deadlift, the press, the bench, the back squat. This is going to give out before the side, like the muscles of the legs, the upper body, or anything like that, the spine. So I like to do that same thing. Is just keep in mind having that core engaged, and we want from the head down to the glutes to work in sync. So we're just going to go into a proper back squat. So you initiate that movement by pushing the hips back, coming down, and then driving back up. In general, we might have a little bit more of an extension in that spine, but if she's holding this, we go into that back squat. We should still pretty much be touching what she is, and then come back up. So everything should be in line. Now, what we do when we get really heavy we think about pushing those hips back really hard. This is where we're getting more of that stripper butt. So we're going to push that back. Once again, we're cramming all the vertebrae together, that head's up, and then we're driving back up. And we're always going to feel that in the back. Always. We don't want that. So we're not using that core anymore. We're using the end range of motion of our spine going onto our skeletal system rather than using our muscular system to help promote that movement. We also have the other way too, or actually when we go into this extension of the spine a lot of times, that's when we get the butt wink. So if you watch her push the hips back, we see the arch of the spine. When she gets to the bottom, you're going to see kind of that butt tuck underneath and then stand back up. That's a little bit of the butt wink, okay? We want to try to stop that movement before then by keeping a little bit more of the core engaged. We also have the other method where we can actually kind of round the back, and that's a lot of the core collapsing forward. Yep, and then we're going to come back up. A lot of times we see it forward when people do not have the ankle mobility. So Nadine, what I'm going to have you do is partially go down, and then I'm going to have you use the hinge to do that back squat. So we're going down, the ankles don't have the mobility, so we're rounding the upper body, and now we're trying to come up out of there. A lot of people do that. You can put that bar down. A lot of people do that when they're trying to hit a 1 rep max, and they're trying to get that below 90 degrees. They'll end up working their way down. Their knees will stop moving, and they don't have the dorsiflexion of the feet, or, you know, their FHL might be a little bit tight, so they can't get those knees forward. So they're stopping, and then for them to get the depth, they're just dropping that chest down and creating the rounding, and that just gets cringe-worthy of what we're going to do. So once again, we all think about these 4 main lifts. We're about to get in the bench press, but when we think about these lifts, we need to make sure that they are a core exercise. Every bit of our movement is core to extremity. Everything starts here. This is going to give out too. Look at the size of your core muscles compared to the size of your legs or your shoulders or your pecs. They're a lot smaller, they're a lot thinner, so they're faster to break down. But they are a stabilizer muscle, or some of them are stabilizer muscles, so you are using them throughout the day a lot more than everything else, which is good, so they can have the endurance and longevity. Sometimes you just need to focus on that. So lighten up your load a little bit, focus a little bit more on what's happening here and a little bit less on what's happening here and here, and you're going to see not only more efficient movements, you're going to see your lifts go up, and take a little bit, but you're going to see your lifts go up, and you're going to see a reduction of pain. But let's go into that bench press. So we're going to just do this with the PVC so you don't have the plates kind of blocking your view. When we set up on a bench press, we should be trying to think about getting the feet pushing into the ground. We should be thinking about the glutes sitting on the bench. We should be thinking about the shoulders pulled back to the bench. And I even like to have sometimes that head pushing down into that bench. That's own personal preference. You can kind of do whatever the heck you want on that one. But those are the things I like to think about when we are doing the bench press. Now, when we see a lot of like powerlifting videos, you're going to see this like huge space right here. And then technically people are like, oh my gosh, yeah, that huge space. People are like, oh my gosh, she's rounding her back. No, that's okay. The reason it's okay is because she has these shoulders and she has these hips on the ground. That's her natural curvature of the spine. As long as, once again, she's keeping a little bit of tension right into this core and this midline section, that's okay. It's not until we lift the hips up then we start worrying about problems that are going into that very low part of that spine, into the lumbar spine. So I was just trying to set up onto that bench press, have those feet down. If we can get the heels down, great. Or if we're trying to drive the heels down, that's fine. Get the glutes on there, and then we're going to extend with those arms straight up. Now, she has these arms lifted up, and then what we want to try and do is we want to track the shoulder blades down. Perfect. A lot of people forget about this in the bench press. They forget to pull the shoulder blades down. She's going to hold those shoulder blades down into that bench press, and we're just going to come kind of right, what I say is, you know, right around the bottom of the bra line, right below the nipple line is in general what I like to say is a good average location to do that. I'll bring that bar down and then driving that back up, keeping those shoulder blades retracted. So one of the common faults, like we said, is that we're going down, we're looking really good with that bar. We bring the bar down to our chest, And then when we go to push off, we roll up onto the toes and lift the butt up to try and work that way up. We don't want that. We want to make sure that we're keeping those points of contact, feet, glutes, and shoulders and head onto that bench. Another common fault we see is the wrist position of what's going on with the bar when we bring it down. So we don't want to bring that bar a little bit too high, because then, so then we have little like cranked elbows. We don't want to bring it too low either. What we want to shoot for is that the forearms are vertical, not only in this plane when she brings the bar down, that they're staying nice and vertical with the bar stacked over the elbows, but we also want to make sure that it's in this plane. A lot of times what we see is people bringing in the hands a little bit too close, and then what that's doing is creating kind of the sacrificial position into the elbow that we're doing the bench press here. We don't want it out too wide either. So we should have, when that bar is down at the chest, those forearms are going to be nice and vertical in both directions, in this direction, into this direction. Good. So let's just show a couple more. Good quality bench press. Keeping the shoulder blades retracted, the glutes on the bench, feet planted on the ground. Good, and we come up out of there. Those are the common mistakes that we're seeing on the 4 general lifts that we see with people. Remember, we want to try and focus on keeping the core engaged. Everything is going to be core to extremity. So focus on that on your deadlift, your press, your bench, and your squat. Try and make those little corrections, see how you move, and start living a pain-free life. See you guys next week. Like, subscribe if you like these videos. Add comments if you want to hear us more. We're here to make videos for you guys, so let us know. Cheers.